It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Darrin Kimbler, agriculture educator in Iron County, and his presentation called Bringing the Garden Inside.
So my name is, as Ann said, I'm Darrin Kimbler, and I live right up here at the very top of Wisconsin. So we have a lot more winter than we do growing season up here. So we do a lot of gardening indoors to keep the greenery around year round. When you're thinking about bringing your garden inside, you need to, assess the space on which you are going to be bringing the plants in, and make sure that you are matching your space with the plants so that you'll have happy and healthy plants throughout the winter. And some consideration is going to be, what is that available light the space has, what temperature variations it is at, and humidity, the relative humidity of that space, and how that's going to interact with the different plants that you may be bringing indoors. So let's talk about light. That's probably one of the big issues for folks bringing their plants indoors is matching those plants that have been outside, especially if these are garden plants that are not usually house plants, with a space to make sure that they're adequate light. If you're bringing in maybe some herbs or other veggie garden, like ornamental peppers or such, you're going to need as bright a light as possible for those to thrive in your house. These are some of your house plants you bring in and out that are more shade tolerant, they may be able to withstand, a little bit lower light intensity. So looking at your space, the top picture there, that is a north facing window. That doesn't get a lot of direct light. It gets no direct light. And so it's sort of in that low to maybe medium light intensity. Whereas the bottom picture is a south-facing sun porch with lots of light, and that gets a lot, up to a high light situation. You'll see references to foot candles, and high light is usually related to 500 to 1,000 foot candles, and then direct sunlight is actually greater than 1,000 foot candles. So understanding, your light requirements of the plants that you're wanting to bring in and your light availability, depending on orientation and windows, is going to play a role. Also, window coverings can play a role. So if you have some kind of a shade film on your window, that is going to reduce the light intensity that you may be getting into that space. One way to overcome low light is to add supplemental lighting. And I have to say that the indoor cannabis industry has been great for indoor gardeners because they have done a lot of work in bringing down the price of good grow lights for everyone. And so you're looking for in grow lights something that is broad spectrum. You can use the red, blue light grow lights, but I find that light tends to be a little harsh for folks, especially in their main living area, but they do produce broad spectrum grow lights that are fairly intense, but provide a white light, a little less harsh on the eyes. When you're looking at grow lights and your plants underneath, you got to remember that the intensity decreases with distance. So you want the growing point to be 6 to 12 inches below the grow light. So having those grow lights possibly on chains or some other way to be able to move them up and down will allow you greater flexibility as plants grow or you switch plants out. And you're looking at probably 12 to 16 hours of light for your plants if you're using grow lights, and they should be used in conjunction with daylight. Don't just have them running over the night to supplement poor light during the day. You want to use them during the day where they are supplementing the natural light that's coming in from your windows. Unless, of course, you do have something that's in the middle of a room that's not getting any light. Then it becomes less important. But for your sleep, I recommend you kind of have that set during your waking hours they can be pretty bright. Temperature and humidity. When you're selecting a place for those houseplants, don't put them next to an exterior door that is open and closed a lot during the winter. Those cold drafts can severely stress your plants. And so it's important that you kind of keep the plants away from any cold drafts and don't let them touch the windows. That can do a couple things. If it is a poorly insulated window, it can actually cause frost damage to your plant. But it also can, touching can also create condensation on your windows, which can cause you problems. So having the plants just a little bit of back away from the windows is better for the plants and your house. So our indoor winter humidities are like the desert. As you get the air temperature gets colder outside, there's less ability to hold moisture. And so when that moisture, that air comes inside and warms up, it's even a lower relative humidity. So you can be down as low as 15% relative humidity in the wintertime. And that can cause some stress on your plants, especially tropical plants who are used to a higher humidity environment. You can actually get drought stress where you get browning on the edges of the leaves because you can't, the plants can't transpire water fast enough to compensate for such low humidities. So adding a humidifier, adding a tray with stones with water in it around your plants to kind of increase that humidity just a little bit, bringing it up into about the 25 to 35% range really benefits your plants. And you don't really want to go too much above 40% because then you're going to start to have condensation on the inside of your windows. And that's and it can also create an environment for foliar diseases. So that 35% is a great goal to have for your plants, unless of course you have succulents, and then they can tolerate those arid environments we have in our winter homes. So you're ready to bring in the plants. You've got your space laid out. It's time to do a little prep before you bring the plants in. One of the things you want to do is you want to start to look for any hitchhikers that may be coming in. Look for under the leaves, in the roots, pull the plant out of the pot, look for any kind of hitchhikers, so eggs, scale insects, aphids, and such, and then treat. If you're seeing just a few, you may be able to rub them off or hit it with a high pressure hose to kind of, knock those insects off. Otherwise, if you're seeing a substantial amount, you may want to use an insecticidal oil or soap, following those labeled directions to treat those plants before bringing them in. And if you're seeing ants on your plants, there's a good chance that they are farming aphids or scale insects for the honeydew. So a good, if you're not seeing scale and you're seeing ants, you may be having a minor scale problem that's just not visible. And you can see in this picture, the scale insect there is very small. It's on the underside of the leaf, and it can sneak in on you. But once inside, those insects, without any predators or environmental conditions, can really multiply quickly. This is a good time to ascertain whether or not you need to repot your plant. If it's really pot bound, this is a good time to repot. If it's not pot bound, wait till the spring to repot as you're taking them back outside. It's also a good time to prune. There's a lot of excess growth maybe from the summer, deadhead, the flower and seed pods and such. And so this is a great time to trim up and thin up your plants before bringing them in. It also allows you, as you're pruning, to do a better inspection for your insect pest. So you bring them in. As you bring them in, it's a good idea to what I call reverse hardening off. And that is acclimate them to shadier and shadier environments before you just bring them from full sun into a super shady environment like the indoors. If you just bring them in straight away, you may see a lot of leaf fall and die back because of the shock of bringing it in. So if you are somebody who hardens off your plants in the spring by taking them out for short periods of time, this is kind of that reverse where you're just bringing them in or into slightly shadier places outside your house to kind of get them used. And you want about a week of hardening off before bringing them in. So right now is a great time to start that process of moving your plants indoors. Don't wait till cold weather. You know, some people will like to keep their plants out there until they see frost in the forecast, to just give them an extra amount of light. But the cool weather can stimulate, especially your more temperate plants, senescence and thinking it's time to go dormant. So you may see a lot more leaf fall after you bring them in because they think they are about to go into a fall and winter mode. So you've got them in, you've got them in the proper light environment. You've got the humidity at the right levels, temperatures in good levels. So you need to maintain them. You want to water them, but you want to water them when the soil in the top inch or two is dry. You don't want to maintain a saturated soil throughout the winter. So monitoring that, doing the first knuckle or second knuckle of your finger to test for moisture is a good way to test and see. And then water until a little bit of water comes out the bottom of the onto the tray. Make sure you have well-drained pots and good trays so that you can water adequately. Plants don't grow a lot in the winter, so fertility becomes less of a problem, but you are leaching some of your nutrients out every time you water, and they wind up, becoming salts and crystals in that tray. So a little bit of a balanced fertilizer, slow release, fish emulsion. Careful with the fish emulsion though, because some of those do have a strong odor. So make sure you're getting something and give that, follow the labels on that for, maybe a monthly or bi-monthly treatment, depending on the type of plant and the growing conditions. If you are growing flowering plants or fruiting plants, they're going to require a little more fertilization than just foliage plants. You're going to always continue to be monitoring and treating pests. The yellow sticky film that you can get for monitoring for white flies and other small flying insects is a great way to trap a few of the early ones, but also to give you an idea that you're starting to see maybe something building up early. And then you can treat again with the appropriate chemicals. And I also like to rotate my plants towards the light. If you are not using overhead light and you're only getting the light in from the windows, is to rotate those plants periodically so that they will continue to grow fairly straight and not lean into the light too much, which can cause you some problems down the road when you're ready to take them back outside. Things you are going to expect your plants to have when you are when you've got them indoors. The growth is going to slow. They're going to produce a lot less flowers and fruit. You can expect some leaf loss. Even if you're doing all of the reverse hardening, you're going to see some leaves being lost. Don't worry about that. And if your humidities are low and low enough and you've got tropical plants, you may see some browning along the edges of the leaves. That is nothing to be too concerned about as long as it's not a disease. You're looking at some normal browning. The plant will still use those leaves to photosynthesize as long as there's about 50% of the leaf still green and capable of. Anything more than that, you may want to think about pruning out. And the water needs will change as you go into April. You're going to see in the temperature and the sun intensity becomes greater, you will see a greater need to water. During the winter, a lot less need for watering, but in spring comes, don't get caught with plants dehydrating because of a sudden need for water. A lot of the insects that come in on your plants and are problem the plants are the sucking insects, and a lot of them are do not require sexual reproduction. They reproduce asexually. And so that's why they can really balloon up in numbers as as the winter progresses. So the first 5 insects are very common sucking insects, and can cause problems. The last one, fungus flies, that is an indication that you probably are watering too much. The fungus flies are like what they say there. They eat the fungus, the mold that may be growing on the surface of your soils. So if you're starting to see fungus flies, you may want to back off watering a little bit. Disease is not a huge problem with winter plants because of the dry environment that you're in. So you don't see a lot of leaf spots and such. But you may get some sooty mold, and that is the result of the honeydew that's being dropped by the aphids. And so it's not a disease in itself from the plant, but an indication that you may have an insect infestation. And then root rots can happen if you are watering too much, especially some of your succulents and desert plants. And as you think about spring, you want to reverse the process. You want to harden your plants off again against the sun so that you don't get sunburnt leaves, and the wind won't break the fragile growth that may have happened during the winter. Time to repot and then increase your watering so that you don't have a lot of, transplant shock, or so to speak, as they go back outside for the summer. And here are some references that will be in the chat on some of these things I talked about today. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Darrin. So I just want to remind everybody that in the chat box, Julie has put in all the links to many of the things for additional information on some of the different topics that Darrin talked about today. So make sure you check out the link in the chat, as well as there's an evaluation link. So we'll start with a couple questions. So lots of questions about bugs, Darrin, and I think that people are just wanting more. And my question after looking over a lot of the questions is, you talked about monitoring them before bringing them in. Is there something people can do before they bring them in? Because they said that they monitor, they bring them in, and then they're there. So is there something, are there any steps that people can do from bringing them in inside that can maybe help eliminate it? People are frustrated that they always seem, they checked it, they looked it over, they bring them in, and wow, there they are.
Yeah, they are. And again, it's doing that inspection. If you see signs of a few, it may be an opportunity to treat again with an insecticidal oil or soap. Soaking your plants in a bucket of water for a short period of time can help float out some of those insects. But if it's scale it's already adhered to the plant, then it's a little harder to get those off. And again, you may be looking at a couple of treatments of that insecticidal soap or oil to kind of minimize that, and just keep on top of it during the winter. Don't let them build up. You can use those treatments and kind of scrape them off as you see them. And that's why using the yellow sticky material is great for monitoring and seeing, before they get too large of quantity and numbers and move from plant to plant.
Thank you. Question regarding the couple questions regarding digging things up and bringing them inside. One was, where would you recommend putting like a large potted plant, such as a blueberry bush or a potted herbs that they have outside, and bring them in? There's not a lot of room inside. Any recommendations for bringing in some of the bigger plots to protect them during the winter months?
Right. Yeah. So you have to think about, what the plant is. Like in a case of a blueberry, that may be a plant that really should go dormant in the winter. I'm not sure that a blueberry will continue to produce flower buds without a period of dormancy. I'd have to do a little research on that, but that may be a plant that may be a good idea. Now, if you're doing it to protect it from extreme cold because it's in a pot, it may, then you're going to want to, you're looking at more of keeping it in dormancy by putting it into an unheated garage or something to protect the roots from being frozen. But as far as bringing it in for life, that last slide had some papaya. So I have papaya tree growing in my my sunroom. So you can bring in those large plants If you're digging something up, you want to make sure that it's big enough to, or the pot is big enough to accommodate any kind of root ball that's there.
What about grasses? People had talked about having some ornamental grasses in pots all summer. Can those be brought in, or basically is that basically a done deal for the season?
I have an 8-year-old lemongrass that I keep in a pot, and I bring in every winter, and it thrives. Grasses are great for dealing with arid and low humidity environments, but they do need a lot of light. And so that's one of those things where grasses are, it's very important that you have a very high light situation for that. Otherwise they don't prosper well.
A couple of people asked about bringing in vegetables indoors and trying to grow them, continue to grow them inside. Any thoughts or comments about that?
That you're going to need to get supplemental light. A window is not going to be enough light for most of those things. We bring our peppers in and put them under lights, and they produce quite well, but they're just going to start getting gangly, especially like tomatoes or something, if you're just using the natural light. So if you're thinking about bringing vegetables in, or even a lot of the herbs, you're going to want to invest in some supplemental lighting for those.
When you talked about some digging up plants and bringing them, like, or doing some repotting and bringing them in, the question was, do they need to wash off existing dirt to make sure they get rid of the insects, or can they just dig up plants and repot and bring them inside and they're going to be fine?
You can leave the soil in with the plant. You just may want to soak the whole root ball, which is you're going to lose a lot of soil that way. But just soaking the root ball for a short period of time, not enough to damage the roots, but enough for any insects to kind of float out of it, should be a good way to protect them. But you may want to, native soils are not the best for houseplants. You may want to go ahead and wash those roots and put them into a sterile media if you're just digging them right out of the garden soil.
Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Have you been seeing any questions coming through? I know we've both been monitoring the question, but you may be seeing some too.
Yeah, Darrin, if you could touch a little bit more on lighting. I think that some people are looking for some recommendations, fluorescent lighting versus maybe some other system. Do you have any recommendations on what people should be really looking for?
Right. So what you're looking for, like I said, is a broad spectrum or red blue. Plants don't use things in the green and the yellow spectrum very well. That's why they reflect back green. That's why their plants look green. It's because they're not utilizing those wavelengths. So you're looking for either fluorescents or LEDs. LEDs have come a long ways. Fluorescents are pretty efficient, but LEDs are much more efficient. And you can, LEDs can be tailored a lot more for various light conditions than fluorescents do. Fluorescents uses a gas and a sort of a film on the tube. The LEDs are, they're created for specific colors. Wider panels are better than narrow tubes. So if you're going to set up something, don't use just one tube. You want to have maybe 2 or 4 or a series of LEDs in a panel. We use 2x4 panels at our house, and it's a broad spectrum. So we do have red blue in the mix, but we also have a white light there to make it a little less uncomfortable for us, in the evenings when we're waiting for the for the timer to go off. And a good timer is important to have. You want to have that time on a timer, but there are a lot of great, as I was saying, the cannabis industry has done wonders for indoor growing for everyone because they've brought the prices of LED grow lights down.
Thank you, Darrin. Let's talk about watering a little bit. So, a lot of our decorative pots that we use indoors might not have drainage holes, or a hanging pot might not have drainage holes. Can you just speak a little bit about the importance of that drainage?
Yeah. So again, as I was saying, saturated soil can lead to root rot. It can lead to other problems. The plants are not growing, so they're not transpiring very rapidly. So it's a good idea to be using that finger test to test and see if it's watering. If you can't get good drainage. It's important that after you water, you go back and inspect to make sure you don't have super saturated soil at the top. You may have to tip the plant over in the sink a little bit or into a glass or something to catch any surplus water if you don't have drainage. And if you do have drainage, it's important to make sure that you don't have water standing in the tray for too long.
And I think that speaks to this next question we had about why to put rocks in the tray if you're trying to have that humidity around the plant and you're having maybe some rocks in the tray with the water. The question was, why do you need the rocks?
So I was thinking more of actually like a cookie sheet tray with rocks in it, as opposed to the tray that the plant is in. And so the rocks act kind of like a little bit of a wick for breaking up the surface temperature on water, so that you get more vaporization with the water that's in a flat pan, shallow pan. So maybe not a cookie sheet, but maybe a square pan or something with some rocks in it that stick above it, up the water, helps wick that water into a vapor more so.
Okay. Next question, Darrin, about a little bit about pruning. So some videos that people have seen online show cutting off just the brown parts of the leaves. Is there a benefit to doing this, or should they just prune the whole leaf off?
I don't prune off the brown parts of the leaves. Again, if the leaf has got a substantial amount of green and you can see no evidence of leaf disease, but it's actually the browning because of low humidities and dry, I leave those leaves on. They're not that pretty, but again, I'm just trying to keep my plants, sometimes some of my highlight plants alive so that they can come back in the spring. So it is up to you, but you don't want to take too much foliage off. And so as long as they're photosynthesizing and there's no sign of disease, and it's just sort of edge browning from drought, I would say leave them. If they get below 50% green, then go ahead and trim them out.
And trim the whole leaf out, not just the brown.
Yeah, trim the whole leaf out. Yeah, there's nothing. The brown is dead, and so it doesn't affect the plant one way or the other.
What about if you're bringing in a plant that still has some flowers on it, some blooms? Should they prune off the blooms prior to adjusting them to the lower light?
You can, or you can just bring them in. As you're bringing them in, the plant will start to quit producing blooms if it's a highlight plant. Highlight plants that flower when they're moved into a shade or in a shady environment produce less blossoms. The plant knows that flowers are energy sinks and they're not producing a lot. Now, if you're bringing them in where you've got supplemental light, you can go ahead and maybe keep those flower blossoms and enjoy them.
Great. When we have had a lot of questions about specific plants or which plants do best moving from outdoor to indoor. So if people are looking for more information about maybe a specific plant or which ones they should move, where should they go?
That University of Florida has a plant guide to light. That is probably one of the best ones for looking at specific flowers or specific plants to bring inside. Because guess what? Florida and us have the same indoor conditions as far as light. So that's a great resource. It's got a nice table and it has moisture on one axis and light intensity and how the different plants do in each of those.
Okay, great. And I put that in the chat as well. And I'll just remind people to fill out our survey here. And do you have any last minute questions before we wrap up?
No, actually, I'm looking at the time. We're pretty much hovering by 12:30. So I think we need to wrap it up. We're sorry we couldn't get to all the questions today. We gave you some resources. We hope you might be able to get some of your answers to your questions from these resources. We want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Darrin, for being our speaker and presenter today. We really appreciated your great presentation. Thank you, Julie, for co-moderating with me, and we hope you enjoyed it. Bye.